Welcome to Paternity Truth. In a courtroom filled with doubt, conflicting memories, and emotional confrontations, the truth about baby Majestic's paternity finally comes to light, shocking revelations, heartfelt admissions, and a DNA test that changes everything. Watch until the end to see who is truly the father, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories from Paternity Truth. The case begins with Mr. Webb firmly denying any sexual relationship with Ms. Cole, insisting that the two of them were nothing more than just friends, a statement that immediately sets the tone for tension and emotional conflict. From the very start, his position paints a picture of distance and disbelief, suggesting that whatever connection Ms. Cole believes existed between them, he does not acknowledge it in the same way. His denial carries an undertone of frustration, as though he feels unfairly drawn into a situation he never imagined would involve him, especially one as serious as a paternity dispute. Meanwhile, Ms. Cole stands by her own account, believing that their interactions were far more intimate than Mr. Webb is admitting, and her body language reflects both disappointment and determination as she listens to him diminish the nature of their relationship. She claims that their friendship did evolve into something physical, even if brief, and that the possibility of him being the father is rooted in moments she insists were real. The courtroom air becomes heavier as both sides describe two completely different versions of their past, leaving the judge and everyone present to navigate a maze of conflicting memories and emotions. The judge observes the dynamic carefully, noting how their perspectives seem to collide rather than overlap, and how much this discrepancy affects the tension between them. The situation grows more intense as Ms. Cole expresses how hurtful it is to hear Mr. Webb deny any intimacy, feeling as though he is denying her truth and the significance of the events leading up to the child's conception. On the other hand, Mr. Webb maintains that he should not be held responsible for something he believes never occurred, emphasizing that friendship was the only bond they shared and that anything beyond that is a misunderstanding. Ms. Cole firmly asserts that she and Mr. Webb did in fact have sex, and she supports her claim with a clear and specific timeline, pointing directly to April 11th as the date she believes conception occurred. Her voice carries both conviction and frustration as she recounts the details, emphasizing that this was not a vague memory or a situation clouded by confusion but a moment she recalls with certainty. She explains that the encounter was consensual, meaningful to her, and took place during a period when she and Mr. Webb were spending more personal time together. By referencing an exact date, she hopes to reinforce the credibility of her account and counter Mr. Webb's insistence that their relationship was strictly platonic. For Ms. Cole, this date represents not only a pivotal moment in their connection but also the foundation of her belief regarding who fathered her child. Her certainty stands in stark contrast to Mr. Webb's denials, deepening the emotional divide between them as they face the court. While she speaks, her demeanor reflects a mixture of hurt and determination, as though she feels compelled to defend her truth against a narrative that erases her experience entirely. She insists that she has no reason to fabricate the encounter, especially given the emotional and social weight such claims carry in a courtroom setting. The judge listens carefully, noting how Ms. Cole's confidence in the timeline adds structure to her testimony. Her claim invites the court to consider not only the physical possibility of conception on that date but also the larger emotional context surrounding their interactions at the time. For Ms. Cole, stating the date so precisely is a way to anchor the truth in something concrete, hoping it will break through Mr. Webb's denial and bring clarity to a situation filled with conflicting accounts and unresolved tension. Webb maintains with unwavering certainty that he never stayed in Ms. Cole's bedroom, insisting that whenever he visited her home, he slept only on the couch, far removed from any situation that could have led to intimacy. His tone suggests irritation mixed with disbelief, as though he feels blindsided by what he considers false accusations. He repeats this point firmly, trying to create a clear boundary between casual friendship and anything romantic or physical. According to him, the idea that he shared a bedroom with her is simply impossible, and he wants the court to see his version as straightforward and logical. Ms. Cole, however, immediately calls this a lie, and her reaction is filled with emotion, frustration, and even betrayal. To her, his denial feels like an attempt not just to avoid responsibility but to erase moments she claims were real and private. She insists that he did stay in her bedroom, that they shared close and intimate moments behind closed doors, and that his current stance is nothing more than a strategy to distance himself from the possibility of fatherhood. Their conflicting statements create a sharp divide in the courtroom, making it clear that they are not just disagreeing on small details but on the fundamental truth of their relationship. Ms. Cole's voice trembles slightly as she challenges his claims, showing how personally she takes his denial, while Webb appears more detached, repeating that he would never compromise boundaries in the way she describes. The judge observes both carefully, noting how their body language and tone reveal the deep emotional investment each has in their version of events. The tension grows heavier as it becomes evident that the truth, whatever it may be, rests somewhere between two drastically different recollections, and neither seems willing to concede even the smallest part of their narrative. Webb presents a chain of text messages that he believes clearly illustrates Ms. Cole's shifting stance on paternity, beginning with moments where she appears uncertain and only maybe hinting that he could be the father. In these early messages, her tone seems hesitant, as though she is unsure of how to approach the subject with him, carefully choosing her words in a way that leaves room for doubt. Webb emphasizes this uncertainty to strengthen his claim that she was never confident about his involvement until much later, suggesting that her story evolved over time rather than being grounded in a consistent truth. He reads the messages aloud with a tone that conveys both frustration and validation, believing that these screenshots support his insistence that the relationship she describes never existed in the way she claims. According to him, her hesitation in the text shows that she was exploring possibilities rather than stating facts, and he uses this to question the reliability of her current certainty. Ms. Cole, however, explains that her early uncertainty was based on limited information and emotional turmoil rather than deceit. She argues that like many women facing unexpected pregnancy, she needed time to process the situation before speaking definitively. What changed for her, she says, was the moment she saw a 3D ultrasound image of her baby. The experience felt powerful and clarifying, and she claims that the baby's features strongly resembled Webb, giving her what she describes as a moment of emotional recognition. This shift from uncertainty to conviction is something she views as completely natural, not manipulative, and she insists that the ultrasound provided the clarity she had previously been missing. The judge watches the exchange carefully, seeing how the texts become not just evidence but symbols of their emotional disconnect, with Webb interpreting hesitation as dishonesty and Ms. Cole seeing it as part of an evolving understanding during a difficult and confusing time. Ms. Cole admits openly that there was at least one other possible father, explaining that she had been with another man approximately a month before being intimate with Mr. Webb, and she emphasizes that she did not hide this fact from either man once she learned she was pregnant. Her admission brings a new layer of complexity to the case, adding an element of uncertainty that neither the court nor Mr. Webb ignores. She explains that her relationships overlapped in timing but not in commitment, and that when she realized she was expecting, she felt it was her responsibility to notify both men honestly rather than make assumptions or conceal information. According to her, this was an attempt to handle the situation with transparency, not confusion, and she insists that she never presented a false narrative to either potential father. Instead, she shared the news with both because she believed it was the fair and morally correct thing to do. Mr. Webb reacts with visible frustration, interpreting this revelation as further evidence that Ms. Cole's certainty about him being the father is not as solid as she claims. For him, the presence of another possible father raises questions not only about biology but about credibility, reinforcing his belief that her version of events has shifted over time. Ms. Cole, however, maintains that after reflecting on dates, symptoms, and especially after seeing the ultrasound, she became increasingly convinced that Webb was the biological father. She explains that her early acknowledgement of two possibilities was grounded in honesty rather than doubt, and that her emotional and physical experiences during pregnancy helped align the timeline more clearly in her mind. The courtroom grows tense as both perspectives clash, with the judge carefully examining how her admission complicates the narrative. What becomes clear is that Ms. Cole's attempt at transparency is now being used as both an explanation and a point of contention, further intensifying the emotional stakes surrounding the truth of paternity. The court turns its attention to Ms. Cole's calendar and the medical timeline connected to her estimated due date, hoping that these details might bring clarity to the conflicting accounts presented. As the judge carefully reviews the dates, Ms. Cole explains that based on what doctors told her, the likely conception window actually falls about a week before the April 11th encounter she previously identified. This detail introduces a subtle but significant shift in the narrative, suggesting that the timeline may not align exactly with the moment she originally believed was responsible for conception. She explains that early in her pregnancy she was overwhelmed, emotional, and trying to piece together memories and interactions that felt blurred by stress, which is why she initially fixated on April 11th as the key date. As the court examines the medical estimates more closely, it becomes clear that conception does not always correspond to the precise day of intercourse but rather to a window influenced by ovulation and biological variability. For Ms. Cole, presenting this updated timeline is not an attempt to alter her story but to provide a more accurate picture based on the information she has since learned from her healthcare provider. She speaks with a mix of sincerity and vulnerability as she acknowledges that the conception window appears to fall slightly earlier than she once thought. This acknowledgement also aligns with her earlier admission that there was another possible father from an encounter roughly a month before, making the timeline a critical piece of the emotional puzzle. Webb listens with a sense of vindication, interpreting this shift as yet another inconsistency that undermines her certainty about his paternity. The judge, meanwhile, remains focused on the facts rather than the emotions, noting how biological timelines often complicate cases like this. The room feels heavier as everyone understands that even with calendars and medical estimates, the truth remains uncertain until scientific testing provides definitive answers, leaving both parties suspended in a tension of memory, belief, and biological possibility. Both sides point out that friends were present on the night in question, creating an additional layer of complexity as the court considers not just personal testimonies but the accounts of outside witnesses. According to Ms. Cole, the environment was casual, social, and filled with people who were coming in and out, which she believes makes it possible that moments of privacy occurred without others noticing. She suggests that the presence of friends does not eliminate the possibility of intimacy, especially if the encounter happened later in the evening when the crowd had thinned or when attention was elsewhere. Webb, however, leans heavily on the statements of two witnesses who reportedly said that no sexual activity took place during the party and that nothing about the interaction between him and Ms. Cole suggested anything beyond friendship. He emphasizes that these individuals were present, observant, and familiar with the dynamics of the night, and he argues that their accounts provide strong support for his claim that nothing intimate happened at all. Webb also reinforces his stance by asserting confidently that even if he had been drinking that night, he has never experienced a blackout or forgotten having sex at any point in his life. He says this with a firm, almost defensive tone, as though the very idea of being unaware of such an encounter feels impossible to him. He insists that intoxication may blur certain details or conversations, but for him, it has never erased entire events, especially ones as significant as sexual activity. His argument relies not only on the witnesses but also on his own sense of bodily awareness and memory. Ms. Cole listens with visible frustration, feeling as though her truth is being overshadowed by testimonies from people who, in her opinion, could not know what happened behind closed doors or after the party quieted down. The courtroom atmosphere grows tenser as both sides hold firmly to their narratives, creating a situation where the accounts of friends, personal certainty, and conflicting memories intertwine, amplifying the uncertainty surrounding what truly occurred that night. Webb emphasizes his personal background as he addresses the court, revealing that he grew up without a father and that this experience shaped his values, his sense of responsibility, and his desire to avoid repeating that kind of absence in anyone else's life. He speaks with a mixture of sincerity and emotional weight, explaining that because he understands what it feels like to be raised without paternal support, he would never walk away from a child who was actually his. This personal history becomes a central part of his argument, not just to defend himself but to show that he has no reason to deny a child that genuinely belongs to him. He insists that what he wants above anything else is the truth, and that he is not trying to escape responsibility but rather trying to prevent himself from being assigned a responsibility that does not belong to him. His voice carries both conviction and frustration, as though he feels misunderstood or unfairly portrayed when he knows in his heart that he would step up if the circumstances were real. Despite this emotional openness, he remains firm in his belief that he is not the father, because according to him, no sexual intimacy ever occurred between him and Ms. Cole. He repeats this point with steady confidence, grounding it in his detailed recollections of their interactions and his insistence that he never crossed the boundaries of friendship she now claims were broken. The tension between these two parts of his testimony, the vulnerable truth of his upbringing and the unwavering denial of intimacy, creates a complex emotional portrait. Ms. Cole listens with visible tension, feeling that his personal history, while sympathetic, does not erase what she knows happened between them. The judge watches both sides carefully, understanding how deeply personal the issue has become, recognizing that for Webb, the fight is not only about biology but also about identity, responsibility, and the fear of being pulled into a life-changing circumstance based on a narrative he believes is not true. DNA results are delivered by the court, and the atmosphere shifts instantly as everyone braces for the truth that has been hanging over them since the case began. When the judge announces that the test conclusively shows Mr. Webb is not the biological father of baby Majestic, the room feels momentarily frozen, as if all the tension, doubt, and emotion that had built up suddenly has nowhere to go. Webb reacts with a mix of relief and validation, his shoulders loosening slightly as though a tremendous weight has just been lifted. For him, the result confirms everything he has maintained from the start, that no intimacy ever took place and that he should not be connected to a child biologically or emotionally tied to circumstances he always insisted were not his. The certainty of the DNA test becomes a powerful shield, protecting him from the accusations and the discomfort of being placed at the center of a situation that he felt was unfair from the beginning. His relief carries a quiet dignity, as though he feels grateful not only for the truth but for the closure he desperately needed. Ms. Cole, on the other hand, faces the result with visible shock and emotional collapse, her confidence unraveling in real time as she tries to process what the scientific evidence now proves. She looks torn between disbelief and heartache, struggling with the realization that the narrative she held on to, the certainty she repeated, and the moments she believed pointed to Webb as the father were all aligned with a conviction that has now been overturned. The ultrasound resemblance she trusted, the dates she pieced together, the memories she clung to, they all seem to dissolve under the weight of the DNA results. The judge watches her carefully, offering a mix of compassion and firmness, reminding her that while the truth may be painful, it also opens the door to finding the real father so that her child can grow up with accurate information and proper support. The court acknowledges the emotional difficulty on both sides, but the result stands with unshakable clarity, ending the dispute and shifting the focus toward the next steps Ms. Cole must take for baby Majestic's future. Subscribe to Paternity Truth right now.